I'm Teresa Carraggio, and this is Third Paradigm. As you can see, I don't mind being upstaged by my beautiful flowers and overshadowed by my gorgeous yard, because we need all the beauty we can get these days. People, we are going through some hard times. As Kathleen Devaney wrote on hers on Crunch Time, that you already know this or you wouldn't be here. And I mean that in a literal sense of on my blog, but I also mean it in a metaphysical sense, because she looks at how we are the right people to be here dealing with all of this that we're going through right now. My fellow intuitives have been having a sense of there being something in the air, some sense of restlessness, unsettledness, awaiting something that is going on that is portending big change, apocalyptic change, things that are suddenly going into a frenzy. Mary Poindexter McLaughlin has been writing about this in her blog, The Art of Freedom. And now here she is evacuating from Florida where she has her home. So this is not in our heads. Or maybe it is, and that's why we need to make sure that our heads are on straight, that we're thinking in our right mind, because this is the time that we were born for. What I do in my episodes is called socio-spirituality, which I term as taking a hard look at the reality in the world while questioning the reality of the world. The first is looking from a masculine side of the brain, and it is using logic and reason and unraveling things like geopolitics, economics, weather weapons, things like psyops, and what it is that they're doing to us with history. Those are things that I look at from a feminine perspective, because I give everyone the benefit of the doubt that I would give my kids if they were doing something completely wrong. And I would say, okay, why are they doing this? One thing that A Course in Miracles says is that love is understanding, which leads to appreciation, which leads to love. It's not some mushy-headed feeling of niceness. It's saying, why the fuck are they doing that? And not letting go until you understand what would make you do the same thing. The other part is the spirituality, and that's using the feminine side of the brain and saying, what is it that's really going on? What is the reality here? It looks at intuition and metaphysics, but it also keeps trading back and forth and going to the masculine, logical side of the brain. I think those two always need to be working together. And that's why every day I start by my spirituality of having maybe an hour where I'm reading A Course in Miracles and doing my meditations on that, and then another at least 3 hours, I'd say, of looking at the socio side of that and reading Unz Review and Substack and making sure that I know all the things that are going on in this plane of reality. But I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about what a miracle is. And that's what I'm going to address today in my episode, Keep a Miracle Diary. We typically think of a miracle as something where we're asking for an intervention. There's something terrible and big and bad that is happening, and we want God to change it. So we want a change in reality, as if God has made a mistake, as if this is something that God plays favorites about. And if you call him by the right name, if you do the right kind of sacrifice, if you do the right little rituals, then maybe you'll get that intervention. That's a completely distorted concept, because what it says is that God is absolutely fallible and kind of a creep. is someone who says, all right, maybe I'll do this, but only if you worship me and praise me and do these things that make you better, that make you my favorite kid. I would never be interested in that kind of God. Here is what I think the miracle really is. It is the tiny things. It is the synchronicities. It's when something bad happens, not a big thing, just a little thing that goes wrong. And then, never before the last minute, does it turn into something where the timing makes it work with something else, where it doesn't actually change it, but it makes it happen in the least bad way possible. It makes other things coincide with it that make that turn out to have been really a good thing in other ways. That's what I think we need to be paying attention to. The miracle is never a big enough thing that mine could convince you. That would change the purpose. That would make it seem as if I'm maybe doing something that you need to copy. And that's not the case. What you need to do is convince yourself. And so paying attention to those little things, to those things that just seem like you end up saying, oh, there is just no way this could have happened by accident, especially not when I add up this one and this one and this one and this one. Those are the things that when you end up in those big situations, those big things that are going wrong, and they are happening more and more, you can step back and you can remember that thing, that little thing that happened. And you can say, okay, if that wasn't an accident, then there's meaning. There's something, and I have no idea what it is, but there is some good that's going to come out of this. And I need to step back and just let this play out. I'm going to tell you some miracle stories from my recent trip to Cumberland, my hometown in Appalachia, which is the northern part not affected by the floods. These are not going to convince you. They're not meant to. They're just meant to show you what it is that I mean when I talk about the miracle. It started with a day when I woke up at 3 a.m. and just laid in bed feeling grateful for my life. And then at 5, I went to go and call a Lyft to get to the airport by 6, and there were none. The drivers were not there. It just kept spinning and spinning and spinning. And so I hurriedly made a panicky reservation for airport parking and entered the wrong credit card number because I was in such a panic, and then flew like a bat out of hell to get over the hill and was looking at the clock and saying, there is no way that I'm going to make it. I'm going to miss my flight. And halfway there, I remember all my clocks are set wrong because my phone was set wrong, and I set my car clock and house clocks all by my phone. So I actually have 13 extra minutes. Now, that's a cheating miracle for sure, but it made me feel like the rest of my trip was just charmed, from the free valet parking at the off-site parking place and the friends that I made telling them the story on the shuttle to every place that I went, because I knew, okay, this is a sign. It's going to be okay. When I get there, I finally find, thanks to a recommendation from my landscaper, the handyman of my dreams. Someone honest, reliable, loves his wife and kids. And so while he's unpacking the truck one day, I hear a woman chatting to him, calling him by his last name. When I go out, she introduces herself, and it turns out that she worked with him as a correctional officer, but is the daughter of the woman who took care of my mom for the last years of her life. This is someone who saved me along with saving my mom. She loved my mom, and my mom loved her. She was like the older sister that I always wanted and the daughter my mom always really deserved. Someone much nicer than I was, very attentive and funny. So that isn't much of a miracle. It's a small world, but a much smaller town. Let's keep going. Then my farmer's market gal tells me that there is a free yoga conference that is happening on the weekend. I go to their website, I find all these interesting practitioners, I set up a massage with one person, and then I go on that day, but I'm running a little late and I'm afraid I'm going to be 7 minutes late for a yoga thing that I really wanted to catch. And there's no one there. There's this beautiful mansion that is all set up, but I can't find anyone. So I then go to this ice cream bakery that is supposed to be part of it. They don't know anything about it. I chat them up for a while, and then I go back to the mansion. And that's when I look at it again and realize I'm not 7 minutes late. I'm 7 days early. It's the next weekend. So I go back to the bakery just to let them know and to figure out my shopping list. And at that time, they say, well, we've got warm chocolate chip cookies in the oven. Would you like some? So I wait for a little while and have the best warm chocolate chip cookies I have ever had for free, and then go and get my groceries and say, I've got a whole day when I can do whatever I want because I had set it aside for this conference that was now not happening. The next day, my daughter's friend is visiting me from Ohio, and so I spend it with her without feeling like I'm missing out on the second day of the conference. On Monday, my handyman lets me know that his mother-in-law has died, something that was expected. But instead of cleaning out the cellar, which is what I was going to need to do with him to do a dump run, instead I go get a pedicure with her. And we spend the day buying flowers and doing all kinds of fun things because the timing just worked out. On Wednesday, my masseuse cancels because her car has been hit by a bus on her way to school. She's okay, but getting things checked out. And so instead that evening, I go to my favorite little dive bar and get a tuna panini for dinner. And while I'm there, the bar owner asks me about my blog that I'm working on. And I say, oh, it's conspiracy theories. He says, well, what kind of conspiracy theories? I say, well, I'm an anti-vaxxer and Holocaust denier. And it turns out that his ex is also an anti-vaxxer, and you know how that goes, and that his grandmother had the tattoo from a camp that she had been kept in Germany, and that she also has written books and given talks about it. So this is very emotional for him, and he needs to leave for a while. And just as I'm about to finish up, he comes back and chats to me and says, well, I'd like to buy you another drink and we could talk about this more. So we continue to talk. And it turns out that his grandmother was Catholic and that her father was a Nazi officer. So she actually does contradict the official narrative of the Holocaust. And we have an amicable conversation. The next day, I notice that someone has liked one of my comments in response on the Bregans and Semitism. And when I go to it, I'm responding to someone else who puts in the fact that Dachau was 83% Catholics and Auschwitz was 53%. What are the odds? On Thursday, my house cleaner informs me that she does not want to come to dinner that night. Instead, she wants to take me horseback riding because she has 3 horses. And so we go out and I feel like a little kid because she's leading the horse around by the rope, which is very docile and known for eating too much grass, which is why it has to wear a grazing muzzle. But it is so much fun. And she runs with it, and it is a day that I just never expected that I was going to have when I woke up that morning. And then it's the right weekend for the yoga conference. And I go to hear the keynote speaker that I would have missed the last time. She goes around the room and has everyone state their intention for that conference. And I say, love. It turns out that that is the theme that she had picked for her presentation. So as she's doing these different yoga moves, she has music in the background, and one of them is a Donna Summer song on love, and it's one that my dance class does, and so I'm just kind of bopping to it a little. And afterwards, I go up to this one woman who I'd seen in the circle, who I just liked her energy, and I said, I could tell you were wanting to dance too to that Donna Summer song. So we get to talking, and when I tell her my name, she says, oh, I stayed at your Airbnb. And then my husband and I decided to move here. And we bought a house 2 blocks away. And my sister-in-law stayed with us for a little while. She moved here and she bought a house 1 block away. And so I am stunned. I'm thinking that Cumberland's $20,000 for people to move there may be the best marketing plan ever, but I am the second best. I am the gateway drug to Cumberland. And then the keynote speaker who was listening happened to say, you know, I had just been thinking what a lovely place it would be to move to Cumberland. And I said, you need to come stay at my place for free anytime you want to check it out, because you would be such a gift to Cumberland. And I did all this to my childhood home in order to give back to Cumberland. So if I could keep the magic going, that would be the best. Then I have my rescheduled massage, but I'm worried that I'm going to have to leave early from this breath work that I really wanted to get taught by this Venezuelan who had studied for 20 years in India and then also had studied Himalayan martial arts that you do with these clubs, which he was teaching the next day. So I let him know, but it turns out that ends exactly at the right time for me to leave. And I go and have the most sensual massage that I have ever gotten. And this is because it involves all the senses. She does the Swedish massage, but she also is a sound symphony person who's going to be doing her thing later at the yoga conference. And so it's surrounded by bird sound and waves and all these different instruments that she's playing. And then she does a face massage with this essential oil that smells so good. And she ends with this thing where she puts this bowl on my belly and rings it and then reverberates it. And I will be scheduling this every time I'm in Cumberland. Let's move on to the return flight. It had been drizzling and misting for the last week, but the last 2 days it was pouring. And there is a tin roof outside the room that I sleep in, and so it really reverberates. And I was thinking, oh, this could be really bad. So at 3 a.m, I'm awake again, and I'm listening to this, and I look up and see whether Southwest lets you change flights. And I find out I could delay for another day for a cost, and that settles me. And I look at where the rain is going to be within the hours that I'm going to be traveling, and I see it's going to be diminishing. So I think I'll take my chances. So it ends up actually kind of clearing, and it is a delightful drive, and I get there in plenty of time, which I need because there is someone who is overzealous at the TSA counter who is rejecting more than he's accepting. But I get to my flight and I see that there's actually going to be a lot of extra empty seats. This is looking good. So I go choose a seat. A woman came and sat on the aisle, and I'm thinking, I'm liking this. And some guy comes and sits right between us. And he says, so it looks like we're all going to be working on this flight. I work for IBM and I'm just feeling good to have a job because they're doing bunches of layoffs. And, so what do you do? And I say, well, I'm actually not going to be doing work on my computer. And he says, oh, so how long have you been retired? I could retire too, but I don't know what I do. My mother, she plays bridge, but how much of that can you do? And so he goads me into telling him I've written a book on economics and that I have this blog. And immediately he says, so what do you think about the economy? What do you think is going to happen? And we go into the BRICS and everything that's happening with the petrodollar that my book talks about. And he says, so, with Ukraine and Russia, I just feel like we shouldn't allow a big country to come in and take over and attack a little country like Ukraine. That just doesn't seem right to me. So I go into the history of Ukraine and I tell him all these different things, but I can tell it is lost on him. And at some point I say, I think it would be better if I read my book because we have another 3 hours to go. So I survive that flight and I get off and there's a woman who was sitting in front of me and we start chatting in the airport and I compliment her on her gorgeous curly red hair. And she says, I was listening to this guy that you were talking to, and he just kept going on and on, and you just kept coming back with facts and logic. And she said, I was texting my daughters, and I was saying, you won't believe this woman behind me. She's incredible. She stays so calm no matter what he says, and she just keeps on giving him history. She said, are you a professor? And I said, thank God, no. And that just made my day. One last story. My next guests were going to be a couple who were retired and helping out their son who had bought a house there and was fixing it up. I had left the house clean, remade the beds and the kitchen and bathrooms, but I didn't bother with the floor because I knew the handyman was still going in and out and trekking a bunch of dirt. They contacted me that day and said, can we get in 3 hours early? And I said, well, my house cleaner hasn't gotten there yet. I haven't heard from her. So let me check with her. And sure, go ahead in, but she may be coming later. So I contact her and I don't hear anything back. And I try calling and I don't get an answer. And I send another message. And this is not like her at all. And finally, I say to them, well, I think that she is not going to be coming, but I'll let you know as soon as I know anything, and I'm really sorry about that. And they're so understanding, and it turns out that they've both had horses, so they certainly understand wanting to ride on a beautiful fall day. The next morning, I get a message from her that she is so sorry that she misunderstood and didn't think that she had anyone, but she went for a sleepover in the field with her horses and took out a blow-up mattress but forgot her phone. And when she looked, I had sent the message 2 minutes after she had left. So she was very apologetic, and I sent them a note, and they said, really, it's fine. There's no problem. We can do this ourselves. And they are salt-of-the-earth, hardworking people, just like she and I are, and so they were fine with it. And I had already been thinking, oh, I wish I could offer them an extra night, but I have somebody coming in right after them. And at the moment I'm looking at my calendar, I get a note from the other person saying, we are so sorry, but we meant to schedule for Monday and Tuesday night, not Sunday and Monday night. Is there any way we can switch it? Come on, people. What are the odds of that? For 7 years after my dad died, I did major work on that house, which gave me something to do while my mom was in assisted living and then a nursing facility so that I could be around her and have a project. But I kept thinking, is this ridiculous? This is so foolish. Why am I putting time and money into this? Who in the world would ever want to come to Cumberland? So I was telling a restaurant owner when I first opened it up on Airbnb, and he gave me a $50 gift certificate for my first guest. I hid it in an art piece and I saved it for this couple that I just had a good feeling about. And they ended up being the ones who bought the house, whose sister-in-law bought the house, and they just reserved it for her uncle because her uncle's daughter wants to move there and has fallen in love with Cumberland, so he's coming to check it out. So this is what I think about when things feel like they are spinning out of control, literally spinning out of control. And I think, no, if there's purpose in little things, then there is purpose in big things. And that's why I think for you, you need to be paying attention to those little things in your life, because you're the only one who can recognize and say, this has to be a miracle. Only you can say, this can't possibly be an accident. For more on this topic, here's What's the Best That Can Happen. And on weather weapons, this is Hazy Days and Tinfoil Skies. Stay happy and don't let anyone or anything steal your joy.